There you go. So, yeah, let's start. So we have just had a bit of a discussion in terms of looking at optimism and pessimism. So let's dive in a little bit more and just this whole idea of mindsets and round up. And actually, Maria Moore, everything you pointed out, you will see and more. So I'm just going to share my screen now and we'll delve in a little bit more to mindsets. So looking at the, exploring mindsets, and before we move on to growth mindset, it is understanding our mindsets. And I love, just looking at a mindset. What is it? Because we talk about our mindset all the time. It is basically a set of beliefs or a way of thinking. We've described they're just very optimistic ways of thinking, pessimistic ways of thinking. So your way of thinking, as we noted in our last workshop, do you remember we talked a lot about your inner gremlins and self-limiting thoughts? The way you think will determine your behavior, your outlook, and your mental attitude. So looking at the styles of thinking, now, if you remember, this is very closely linked, and again, by the same author we looked at in terms of one of the leading research in the positive psychology field, Martin Seligman. And in his book on optimism, this is a lovely thing to think about in 3 Ps, and just remind yourself in terms of, what is more positive, outward looking thinking. And we'll be talking about the growth mindset in a little while. So you will notice different people with different mindsets who have more predominant styles of thinking than others. You can predict some of how they will think in terms of 3 Ps. And what do I mean by that? Well, this is in terms of how we explain things we see and feel around us to ourselves. So particularly if anything goes wrong. So quite like the self-limiting thoughts, you'll see key things here. So the first one is someone who has that set thought. If a setback happens or challenge happens or incident, somebody of a more pessimistic mindset, who thinks in terms of this permanency. Oh, nothing will ever change about this place. This always happens. I mean, you hear that regularly about our own part of the world, Northern Ireland. So, but if you're constantly in that train of thought, it can be very difficult to shift. Whereas an optimistic thinking will be characterized more by, actually, this is just a passing thing. It is not a permanent state of affairs necessarily, or there can always be an opportunity for change. And that is where you will find a difference in terms of thinking. We looked at it, and again, that style of self-limiting thought. But if you let your thoughts of pessimism be pervasive, and you can see it there in that phrase, everything always goes wrong. It's always a mess. So one thing may go wrong, but then you start thinking, that permeates, that pervades your thoughts, wriggles in like a thought worm. And you begin to think, well, if that thing goes wrong, everything else can go wrong. And we're all going to go to hell in the handcart. It's dreadful. So the optimism will, again, you can see it's time bound. It is looking at the here and the now. It's a particular situation. It is not an ongoing state of affairs. So you can see by just those time frames, and optimism will think much more on the here and the now, looking ahead, the possible, but not get stuck as in, this is permanent, it will never change, it's always dreadful. So that's the permanent, pervasive thoughts you will see much more associated to explaining things to yourself in a pessimistic style of mindset. And then there's other things of personal, we talked about that the last time. No matter what else is happening around you, you attribute to yourself. It's something you've done, even though 9 times out of 10, it may not be. So an optimist more pervasive, pessimistic style of thinking will personalize it. It's down to me. I'm an idiot. I've done something wrong. I'm not good enough, or I can't handle. Whereas an optimist is a key to, and it's always one of the things we look at in mindsets, and we'll especially see it in a growth mindset, is, and if you look at that phrase, you know what, I made a mistake, I misjudged, but I'll bring that learning with me for the next time. So again, nothing's permanent, nothing's pervasive, and nothing's personal, i.e. as in they're not beating themselves up over it, which is again very classic in terms of pessimistic style of thinking. So these are some of the benefits, and Maura, you had hit on just in terms of our optimistic thinking that we can enjoy from optimism. If you generally take a more optimistic outlook, or try and think more, just as Maura done with some of her tips she was sharing with us this morning. You can rewire, and it does really help with your mindset. You are much more adaptable to negative events if you're not stuck in that, pervasive, permanent, personalized, way of thinking, and all the rest of those different types of self-limiting thoughts come up to it. You're much more likely to be inventive. We talked about reframing in our last workshop, and seeing things in a positive light. And you have a lot else which comes with a more optimistic mindset, a sense of humor. The learning, as we talked about, is key. Problem solving, and with the humor, and that ability to zoom out. And you're probably likely to be able to be a little bit more determined if you're optimistic, because you will see more opportunities to see your project through. And absolutely, Maura, as you correctly pointed out, you are healthier and more productive with your optimistic ways of thinking. So this is one of the things, and again, we talked about, and Marie, you had mentioned it, but this is a nice quote here, because with optimism, you tend to push yourself a little bit more. If you are stuck in, the pattern of self-limiting thoughts or that pessimistic mindset, it can be very difficult to move on or try something new. And I love this Helen Keller quote, it's just, we'll have sailing as a bit of a theme today, by the way, because with pessimism, you're much less likely to stretch yourself, because the fear of failure or your lack of confidence in yourself to, step up and push yourself a little bit just simply isn't there enough for you to try. So looking, and here we go, and this, Marie, exactly as you pointed out, I want to divide it now and looking into this whole thing of blind optimism and pessimism and this whole realistic way of thinking. So the downsides then, and as well important to note, Maura, of blind optimism, it's just this wishful thinking. And Maura, therefore, as you correctly pointed out, Marie, you had mentioned this, blind optimism is equally as damaging as ongoing deep-rooted pessimism, because in terms of there is no thinking of the possibility of failure opens you up to all kinds of dangers and other people taking advantage, or just more, as you were talking about it earlier, setting yourself up for a fall if you haven't really thought things through. It can also lead to snap decisions, poor judgment, or planning, thinking that, and that's why there's that, I love this picture of the elephant there, as you will see, where it'll all be grand thinking. Not everything will always be grand, and some stuff needs to change and happen. And you need to think about what if things go wrong. The reason I put that picture of the cup there, as you can see, with just looking at the sea and the waves and weather, where realistic optimism, you are looking to chart the waters ahead. You're looking into the future. You're looking to see what you might be able to pick out in your crystal ball. And Marie, this is exactly as you described. It's optimism with eyes wide open, which is a lovely phrase. Realistic optimism, you'll also be aware of people are flagging stuff up to you, warning you, giving you feedback, which maybe you didn't want to hear, but it's important to note. Realistic optimism is always being aware of, and it goes back more linking to your point of going, what do I need to do? What do I need the resources I need? What effort do I need to put into this? It's not just all going to happen overnight. And if plan A doesn't work, do I have plan B? And that is one of the biggest things in terms of thinking of our mindsets and developing them as much as we can, just looking with that realistic thing. Okay, I'm really, geared up for things going well, but if they don't, what am I going to do? So this is, again, as I did say, we keep it on our sailing theme here. So this is a lovely one. And it is, Marie, you particularly like this one and thinking of it because it's very much a realist. And just a nice quote to remind us that actually things don't always go the way we plan. So let's, this is the plan B. And I suppose looking at this in terms of, there is a real argument for having a little bit of pessimism, or rather as we call it, because like you, Marie, I'm not a particularly huge fan of the word. It is such emotional connotations, but instead I'm calling this a context for caution. Optimism is not suitable, that blind optimism, but you need to have a very high level of realism if you are undertaking or planning for something very risky or uncertain, and which says caution is much, much better than optimism, that pessimistic view of what could go wrong, help you manage the risks. Where the cost of failure is high, again, that optimism without that planning and without maybe thinking of what could go awry could cost you very dear. And optimism sometimes just is simply inappropriate, where the situation is very serious or there's no way out and everybody knows it. So say, for example, if you're speaking to someone who has a very serious or terminal illness or life-changing, empathy is maybe better than optimism, because sometimes optimism, when used inappropriately, can be very, very jarring in a particular situation. So I'm just going to stop the share here. I would love Maura and Marie to just hear your thoughts and comments on just some of the things you heard there, because we covered that whole gamut of the optimism, pessimism, and the realistic optimism. What thoughts would you have, if any, just on, thinking about those mindsets? Maura.
Yeah, Mari, I like the 3 P's of thinking.
Yeah.
I love that. That actually opened up my mind to that when you talked about the permanent thinking, the pervasive thinking, or the personal, the things. I've done some of those.
We all do, Maura. We all do. Yeah, absolutely.
All of that was a great learning experience. Where I love to hear it, right in front of me, and the different. The context for caution actually was another one, because we can be too optimistic and we can be really, I think, and particularly if you're making any life-changing situations where that involve maybe a lot of cost or a lot, like moving home or doing anything. They all. Yeah. It was very good. Loved it all, Mari. Thank you.
And don't worry about, I'll have loads of notes. Do you remember in the ebook in the end, more, and you get the presentations after as well, so be a lot more there. Marie, what thoughts did you have looking at all of that? Because it is a spectrum, isn't it?
Again, like Maura, I thought the 3 P's of thinking was very good, because again, like that, we've all been there. We've went through the permanent negative thinking. This is never going to change. This is always going to happen. And, the other one there about the personal, why does this always happen to me? It's my fault. Although I have to say, sometimes when you're rearing kids, it's my fault that something goes wrong with them. But anyway, so that was very interesting. I like that context for caution. I liked that one. I just thought, it sort of resonated. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. Very interesting. I like the realistic optimism. I like that one, so there's things definitely that resonate. And
we'll be going on now as well, and this is another, have either of you heard of the growth mindset? Have you ever heard that expression?
No.
You have Maura and Marie, that this will be an interesting one, because this builds even further on that as well, and in terms of that realism and challenge. And Maura, when did you come across the growth mindset?
I done personal and business communication advanced diploma with Queen, so I covered that in the personal development.
Now, I'll be very impressed. Can you remember the woman associated with the growth mindset?
I can't, Maura.
Oh, don't worry, I was going to say, you would be so impressed. I have to remind myself sometimes of all the theories and who comes up with them. But Marie, this is, we're about to go in here in terms of looking at mindset. And there is this very famous book actually brought out by, she was a specialist in child psychology, American again, Carol Dweck. And she published a book, hit the bestseller list, in terms of all about this idea of how fixed or set our mindsets are, and actually how we can look to expand them into a growth mindset. And I mean, a lot of her psychological research was initially done in schools and children as well, but no, it's absolutely applicable. And she's done research on this for adults too. So, do you know what I'm going to do? I want to hear from you. Let's see, even if this is, I know this is not a new concept for you, Maura, but putting down, see, when you think of those words of growth mindset and fixed mindset, and let's look at fixed mindset. What comes to mind if someone was, if you would describe somebody as having a fixed mindset, what would you imagine them to be like? And just shout out, you know.
Rigid.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, absolutely, Marie. Yeah, rigid. And say a wee bit more on that. Rigid and what?
Rigid in terms of maybe their beliefs or understandings, unwilling to change, unwilling to see that there might be another way,
Yeah.
another mindset.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I would describe them as, what's the opposite of inflexible, is it, or unflexible?
Inflexible. Yeah.
Inflexible.
Inflexible. You're right. First time. Yeah.
And could be
Absolutely.
quite difficult to work with, I would think, then, if that was the case.
Yeah. A lot of key words there as well. Maura, what would you add to that? If somebody has a fixed mindset, what else would you add to that?
Yeah, pretty much what Marie said there. Plus, you know, yeah, that black and white, you know, set mind where they're right, and this is the way you should go. Probably a lot of conditioning and self beliefs there, that unwilling to listen to another person's point of view.
Very good. And I think those additions, and Marie, you give a lovely list there. Absolutely hitting on all those key points, fixed mindset, and a couple of really key additions there, Maura, as well. That black and white thinking, and there's that whole thing of that's right and that's wrong, you know, and it is very, very fixed. Yeah, and absolutely that can cause difficulties in them connecting with other people. When we think about, let's shift to a more verdant area. When we're thinking about a growth mindset, Maura, what springs to mind for you?
Your growth mindset is somebody who's open to listen to other people's point of view. Normally come across really as a good leader.
Yeah.
And the growth mindset is open to all possibilities.
Yeah.
And obviously that listening skills and all the attributes that are needed to go along with that.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Lovely start. And what else, Marie, would occur to you, adding on with what Maura says there? Somebody said to you, Marie, you've got a great growth mindset. What would you love to have about it? What springs to mind?
I think maybe an openness to change, maybe, or an awareness that, you know, there may be other opinions out there may be other styles out there, other ways of doing things. You know, just because this has worked in the past may not necessarily be the way for the future. You know, it might be more inclusive of other people's beliefs, understandings, ways of doing things.
Yeah.
Probably adaptable as well.
Yeah. And actually, many of this is mirroring the kind of fixed mindset, isn't it? Or mirror, or an opposite reflection of, that's a really couple of lovely additional points there as well, Marie, that awareness to others, you know, because part of this mindset, you know, when we think of mindset, this is all connected in as well to a level of emotional intelligence, you know, what we know and we see about ourselves and what we notice and how we read the room, and our social awareness of others around us, and how we manage those relationships as well. So that importance of the inclusivity and versatility and that awareness, absolutely key, you know, in terms of the growth mindset. So brilliant, both of you. Let's unpack, because you've more or less covered all of the points, and there's some additional points here, because part of having a growth mindset is also key to that motivation, you know, and looking at our motivation. And it also connects back into, you know, clear links to optimism, pessimistic thinking. But, you know, there's an element of realism there as well, which brings all of it together. So I think it's a lovely concept to explore in a bit more detail. So let's do that now. Let's look at when we talk about these things in growth mindset, well, what exactly does it mean? And absolutely every single point that you have brought up. So I love this picture, just in terms of the mindset, because you see that little spade, the guy with the spade working and constantly nurturing, constantly growing, you know, and you just get a sense from that picture that actually that openness is there, that both of you talked about, that flexibility, the awareness and adaptability. So this is in terms of Carol Dweck. This was what she had seen from her research and noticed in terms of how we can actually grow our mindset. So if you look at the center column, you know, she compared how different people were with fixed mindsets when they looked at skills, challenges, efforts, feedback, and setbacks, which is all linked as well to optimism and realistic optimism. So yeah, fixed mindset, a key thing to remember, which she discovered, there are a whole cohort of people out there who genuinely do believe something you're born with is fixed, whether that's your intelligence, whether that's your talents, whether it's that your skills, and it is. And you're right to say it in terms of more very black and white. You know, there's not a great belief there that you can really change yourself. And in terms of challenges, you'll find someone with a fixed mindset, they do tend to give up easily. They don't really take on any big challenges. They play it safe, you know, and very much in that fixed space. Do they stretch themselves? No, not a huge amount. So, and if you're looking at the fixed mindset, it is, again, because it is linked to that idea, well, if you're born brilliant, you just stay brilliant. So therefore, effort is only something you do when you've made a mistake or when you're not good enough, and you don't have to make a huge amount because you have these innate talents and strengths and you just need to use them. Someone with a fixed mindset can really struggle with feedback. They can easily get defensive and take it personally. And that, is, you're right, Maura, can make sometimes people very difficult to work with who have a fixed mindset, because there's that lack of openness. And in setbacks, someone with a fixed mindset will be the first to blame the world and his wife for their own shortcomings, and will probably give up quite quickly at early stages when encountering setbacks. Growth mindset, you can see on the opposite side, and I'm just going to pick out a few because both of you got them, you know, and really covered that so well. Keywords, there's always that belief in a growth mindset that you can always improve. There's always something you can do better. There's always room for growth, which is fantastic. And, you know, and again, you see a lot of the reframing techniques that we used in our last workshop and spoke about, how that, you know, you can see challenge as an opportunity to grow. They'll get more, someone with a growth mindset will, you know, tackle that challenge a little bit more. Someone with a growth mindset, a key word is often used in growth mindset, is mastery. You will put in the effort. You want to be good at something. You may not be the best at, but that doesn't matter, but you want to be good at it at your own level, you know, what you aiming for. And feedback will always be welcome with someone with a growth mindset. They're hungry, they want to learn. And this is where that inclusivity, Marie, as you mentioned, you know, comes in with other people. And again, a core factor to think about is they will use setbacks as either one of two things. If something goes wrong, use it as a wake-up call to work harder next time, but they'll see setbacks as, again, as an opportunity to learn too. So just running through, I mean, the impact, it can be very, you see it all the time. And I bet, Maura and Marie, you will know people and you see where they have very clearly a fixed mindset. And what is the impact of a fixed mindset? Someone with a fixed mindset, they will put a lot of pressure on themselves to prove themselves. And you know, that whole idea of losing face is a big thing with someone with a fixed mindset. You know, and if they're slogging at something, they'll automatically think they're not good enough. A fixed mindset always can be quite a competitive one. And especially if you believe you're born with these amazing talents and, you know, and you want to be seen as the best at, sometimes good enough just doesn't hit it with a fixed mindset impact, and hence it can become very competitive actually quite quickly. Black and white thinking, Marie, is something you put there, and absolutely, it's the good, the bad, the strong and the weak. There's no in between, there's no grays, and it's very categorical on what's good and what's not so good. As we've mentioned already, someone who is living life with a very fixed mindset will suffer badly in terms of their own resilience, because they don't have that adaptability, that flexibility that we all spoke about earlier. And as we said, there's not much stretch. So a fixed mindset person will be very risk averse. They won't try new things easily. And it self-limits their experience, because they may have too many fears that they're not going to be good at it. They're going to look foolish doing it. They might not be the best at it. So why try? You know, you can see clearly all the impacts connected to fixed mindset and impact. Whereas a growth mindset, you know, you'll have a more, you know, you will always see an opportunity to grow. You see those learning, even in setbacks, you feel more passion, you want to do it more, you see the opportunity for change. There's much more a spirit of learning generally in someone with a growth mindset, and this is the benefits. And with that learning, and again, it's something Ray, you pointed out, you know, it gives you more opportunity to be versatile and connect and learn from other people. You know, people with growth mindsets generally suffer less stress. They're not worrying about losing face. They're just worrying about doing their best for them and learning from mistakes, you know, or learning new skills, taking feedback. They'll be very open. And generally, do you remember when we looked at self-esteem? These are growth mindset. Many traits of the growth mindset are very cognizant and correlate very, very clearly with high levels of self-esteem. And, you know, recognizing some of the things that, you know, might indicate to you that you're having a fixed mindset trigger. And we have all of us fixed and growth mindsets, depending on what we're thinking about within all of us. And that's why I like that picture, because in some things we'll still have triggers we maybe carry around for us for a while and why we won't do something. So when you're, you know, do you get a bit nervous or almost paralyzed nerves if you're thinking about doing something new? How easily do you give up, you know, when you hit a wall? Do you look, you remember we talked about the power of comparison? Are you seeing somebody performing, you know, better than you in something you pride yourself on, and then do you get a bit narked? You know, people with fixed mindsets find it sometimes difficult as well to celebrate somebody who they see as better than them because they want to be the best at, you know, if it goes back to some of the negative thinking. Do you only basically, you know, if you encounter disagreements on a new path, do you give up? You know, if you missed a deadline, do you persevere? If not, you know, signifier of you know, some of those fixed mind triggers. So these are some lovely reflective questions just to use. You know, if you feel yourself hitting a wall and facing some of those fixed mind triggers, here are some questions. You know, what can I learn from this? What changes can I make in my effort? How can I improve? And it's that, you know, that constant finding ways forward. What will I do next time if I'm in this situation? Remember this learning from now. I'm not going to make that mistake again. Or I've gained from this situation from learning. And then just in terms of looking at growing your own mindset, how do you grow your mindset? Keep setting goals. It can be big or small. When sometimes you hear goals, people think of big life goals. No, they're not. They're small, tiny goals. It can be really, really small, right through to life-changing goals. But that whole idea of working towards something for yourself it will help you sustain a growth mindset. Helping other people, mentoring, whether it's through your knowledge, your skills as well. People with a growth mindset are very, very keen and willing to help others, and they stand out for it as well. We talked about, see, remember the whole array of self-limiting thoughts we talked about, just having an awareness of them, especially when you're trying something new or taking on more a personal project. And even when you are successful, you know, people who are successful in a certain field or sphere, you know, if they ask, they constantly keep open to that new ways of doing things, Marie. That adaptability, which you mentioned earlier, is absolutely key. And these are the things that help us for growth. The other things that help us for a growth mindset are, again, a level of self-awareness. Remember we said before, your emotions or data, acknowledge them, process them. So if you're feeling struggling and you're feeling insecure, inadequate, you know, these are signs also as well. If something is important to you and want to keep that growth mindset, ask for help. Acknowledge first that you're struggling. That's half the battle. Then, you know, go to someone you trust or someone who you think you could find help from, or learn others who've gone through a similar experience or at a similar level where you want to be, you know, as part of what you're working on. And we are just going to stop there. So I'm going to just come in and ask you in terms of thinking about, that growth mindset. Yeah, take a little moment and reflect and maybe share a moment where you have undertaken something which you didn't necessarily think you could do. But it'd be interesting to know how you achieved something or went about it. So I'm maybe going to start with just that question on achieving something you never thought you would. Let's keep it that broad and have a chat. Marie, what springs to mind for you? And it can be anything at all, big or small, on achieving something you didn't necessarily think you might.
Well, interestingly for me, was this year I have volunteered in the vaccination centre. And I am a pharmacist, but haven't really worked now for a few years.
Oh my goodness, Marie.
And one of the vaccinators said to me, he said, why are you volunteering? He said, why are you not working here? And I said, well, I'm volunteering because I like to volunteer and I like to give back and all the rest.
Yeah.
But anyway, that got me thinking. So it's amazing the chain of actions then that I put into place. So I saw a course coming off that was going to enable me to actually be a vaccinator. So I thought, yeah, I'm going to go for that. I'm not putting any pressure on myself. I'm going to try it. So I went and I did the course. And when I said that, I actually, by saying that, I encouraged 2 other people to come with me, not by saying to them, I needed for them to come with me because I was going to go anyway. So I went and I did the course, and I suppose I was realistic about the course. And I thought, right, okay, if I was going to do this, I want to do it in one of the vaccination centres. I would not do it, in a local pharmacy or whatever. So I'd sort of set my parameters there. So anyway, that was okay. I continued to volunteer. And then one day I was approached by one of the staff and said, we're really short of staff. Would you consider coming to work with us or for us? So I said, right, okay. Not sure, but you know what I'll do? I'll come and shadow for a day. So I went and shadowed for a day, and I thought, yeah, this is possible. So I went back to base and I said, right, okay, yeah, I could do this. And so then that set the whole wheels in motion. So I'm actually starting tomorrow.
Oh my goodness, Marie, what a fabulous story. Oh, how are you feeling about tomorrow then?
Well, I'm again like that. So I've got all my information together. So I'm going to sit down and read through it later on.
Yeah.
But as well as that, I have to say, during this lockdown, I discovered Northern Ireland Rural Women's Network, and it's been the best organisation that I've discovered, because before your course, I had taken part in another course, and that sort of set the wheels in motion in terms of, yes, I have sort of, not that I pigeonholed myself, but, I'd got out of the way of thinking that, yes, I could do this. So that course started off, and then you have reinforced it with your course. So yeah, it's been really, really good. Yeah.
I think that's fabulous, Marie. Maura, what do you think listening to that? Isn't that that's inspiring.
Marie, I want to wish you all the very best.
Yeah.
What a lovely and wonderful story, and how it all actually unfolded. So good luck, and I'm delighted for you.
I think it's brilliant. I think it's brilliant. And I love the way that you said that. Yeah, absolutely. And this is what these workshops and courses aim at for, Marie, because it's just to create a space where you can think about these things, but actually very selfishly think about yourself, both of you as well. Totally and absolutely necessary. And you see, and I love the way you said it, just triggered, and all this, all these little things have happened, and look at where you are now, Marie. That is fabulous. That is fabulous. And I think the fact that you have launched yourself into it is just superb. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Superb. So well done. And we'll be keeping our fingers crossed for you tomorrow.
Well,
I had my second jab yesterday, so I'm very pleased with myself. So Maura, thinking about yourself, you know, what springs to mind for you whenever of something you never thought you could do, but you know what? You did it.
Yeah, I going back to Nerwin, as
Yeah.
Marie rightly mentioned there. I've known Louise and Charmaine from Rural Community Network. I've been very involved with different courses and projects before the lockdown and all. And I'd met a friend at that course who was wanting to actually leave nursing, to give up nursing and to go to something totally different. So she asked me to come along to an open day.
Yeah.
And it was a course held by in Caffrey, which was obviously accredited by Queen's University in Belfast.
Yeah.
And it was a 1 year advanced diploma, and the both of us were funding it ourselves. So we're a lot of, when we say a lot, we're about 10 or 12 participants there from civil service, education board, councils who were funded, but we were paying for that course for ourselves.
Okay.
And the two of us embarked in that. Now I was actually, I was 58 years of age. I'd left school at 18, and I went to London to work in the bank.
Yeah.
And the reason why I went to London is because my sister was there from the early 1970s. There just was no work. So I went over in 1974 and I joined the bank there. But when I came back home, look, I've married, and I've been living, but at 58, I reached the stage in my life where my GP told me if I didn't go and do something for myself, I would be dead before my mother.
Wow.
And that was the sentence that I got, black and white like that there. So I called actually some family around, because I had no sisters here to actually help with the caring role. And I got, I can share this, you know, quite openly with yourself and Marie.
Are you sure? Because I can pause the recording here. No, I just pause it as well. Yeah, you're okay. They will get someone with a Irish or Northern Irish accent soon. Always throws me the American. So we are going to, So we have looked then. So we've looked at just that importance of fixed mindset and growth mindset, and the importance of getting help and goals and challenges, and Maura and Marie's own stories show us, you know, how different types of challenges we can make. So we'll just finish up today in terms of looking at, you know, for those tips and techniques of motivation. Who's familiar with Maslow hierarchy of needs? This is something which you see it in lots of different places. Anybody come across it?
Yes, Mari, that's the one they actually done in Queen's course, you know, starting off from your home right up. That's the one we covered there. Yeah,
great. And actually, Maura, Maura, do you want to say a few words about just what you remember about it, you know, and we'll add to it? Yeah, because always nice to hear.
Just my understanding of it basically was Maslow's. It sticks out for me, and I've talked about this at different courses through Nerwin, you know, through the thing. I think if you haven't got all your basic needs met, at the very, just to put it in short terms, if everything is not met for your basic needs, what you need, you talk about like food and water, up to your own home and those that love, all those things have to be in place before you can aspire or really your self-esteem, all them things, your work and your employment, they're not going to be right if you haven't got the basic needs met. So it starts off at the very bottom, goes for your health, your home, your family, and then that's how you aspire to become better at what you're doing now. Things.
Beautifully described, Maura, beautifully described. And, you know, Marie, this is Abraham Maslow. Again, this was all at the very, very start of looking at, you know, way back when those different aspects, which were still quite embryonic then in positive psychology, you know, of understanding what works well for people. Remember, we talked about before, a lot of psychology had looked at fixing problems and preventing problems, but actually there wasn't much around in terms of, when you see people excelling and doing really well, well, what makes that? Is that's the underpinning of positive psychology. But you will see here, and we'll talk about a couple of examples. So Arthur Maslow was also very interested in this whole idea of motivation and personality. And that was where this comes from, the hierarchy of human needs, when he was researching this as a psychologist. So absolutely, as Maura described, that we can only really, as Maslow asserted, can only really become our best selves when you see at the top of that triangle in terms of self-actualization, and that is the growth mindset. That is when we are really pushing ourselves, when we are feeling at our best, our most innovative, our creative, our most fulfilled, we feel on top of things. But actually, what will distract you before you get to that stage, what will distract you is if there are those basic needs, which Maura very well described, if there are gaps or we feel very insecure, in those levels below self-actualization, like, for example, if you don't have your basic, your food, your water, a safe place to stay, are you really going to be undertaking massive life improvement projects? Absolutely not, You ask anybody who's had any difficulty, severe difficulty with finances, with accommodation, with relationships, can you function and being your best self when there's a real crisis which goes to your fundamental needs? You look after your fundamental needs first. And for anybody to be their best selves, absolutely you can work things in tandem. But if there are serious issues there, just in terms of, your basic needs, if you have other issues there where your self-esteem is low, your sense of belonging and relationships, that you feel that that's not there to support you, well, these are all things that we need to work on, before we can actually, try and be our best selves. We can actually navigate our way through. For example, if a relationship goes wrong, you can still do really, really well in pursuing your dream. So it's not all, if one piece goes, it doesn't all fall down. But actually, it's just a really important way of look after the basics first, and then, plan to, in terms of that level of self-actualization is when you're at your best self and you feel most free. Different types of motivation, and I think it's really interesting way to look at this, because you will see it play out in people and in yourself. So if we look at what motivates us as part of the psychology of motivation, we have what would be those inner motivators of ourselves, and those are what's known as intrinsic. So those are fed from within us. So, for example, if we're undertaking a project or looking to achieve something, and if we're intrinsically motivated, i.e. that motivation comes from inside us, chances are you'll be pursuing and we both talked, Marie and Maura, earlier, wonderful triumphs, on what you've achieved, just in terms of, both of you were pursuing knowledge and growth and passion, with the new opportunities just in your life, which you have made happen for yourself. That came from a very intrinsic place in both of you. And you had a purpose there, and you had something about yourself and giving time to yourself, which you wanted to achieve. And that for both of you took passion, dedication, and a huge amount of effort. But you all saw it through, to the successes you're experiencing now. But that was all very intrinsic. Extrinsic motivation, we will recognize, and that's a very different beast. That is actually when we are motivated by something externally outside ourselves. So hence you have the X there. So that could either be deadline. We talked about, for example, people with fixed mindsets being very motivated by social status and how they look and how they're perceived to be. Other intrinsic motivations particularly can be money, prizes, winning, the fear of failure, again connected to, I better get this, I don't want to look stupid. And also other perks that we may encounter just to make us go the extra mile. So oftentimes we can find ourselves at different times in life working for a mixture of both, but some of our key life goals are likely to be much, much more intrinsic, on that left-hand side when they're motivated by ourselves. So you can see, and again, this is another way of just looking. Do you remember we were talking about in this all motivation and our mindsets are shades of gray, you know. But if we look at the more the black and white ends of the scale here, so intrinsic, sometimes people, you know, the phrase the carrot and the stick, very much extrinsic motivation, you know. So your reason may, I have to, or else. There can also be a punitive impact of extrinsic motivation. I better do this study for this exam or I will fail. So, and you can see an extrinsic, just to sum up again, we're doing it because we have a reward or punishment, but also extrinsic motivation can be defined by actually our emotions. We would feel guilty if we didn't do that. For example, if I let my sister down, I said I'd do something I wouldn't, you know, that can force us to maybe go through because you don't want to let the other person down. And you can see the intrinsic, where you're doing it, as we said, where I choose to, I love to, that's why I'm doing it. Nobody else is forcing me to do it. In fact, I have to put a lot of work in to do it, but that's a sure signifier of something which is intrinsic and motivation. So whenever you're struggling with something, you're motivated, this can be an interesting way of looking at it. What is behind the motivation? What is moving me? Is it coming from the external? And I'm not really getting with the program in this. Or is it something I need to reconstruct, you know, my own idea of my own growth mindset in terms of what I have to do if it is something solely motivated by me. So we have both talked there, Maura and Marie, about the benefits of the projects and goals you both have set yourself and both succeeded amazingly at. And we've talked about what that can bring. And one of the things in terms of looking, you know, how do we realize our motivation is having these life projects and goals. So they can bring us just sheer happiness. They can bring us a huge amount of meaning. They can change our lives. They can give us more a sense of control. And Maura, that was something I was definitely picking up from you in terms of this was doing something with yourself. For both of you, I felt a little bit of magic, you know, in terms of how you'd gone about and worked so hard and pursued it and made things happen. And you know what, both of you did it yourselves. And other benefits for some people, they can use it as actually, this will give me a structure, this will give me a focus. And other people simply do it because they love the challenge, you know, of setting themselves some projects. But here's to do with mindset. And it's one of that classic Henry Ford quote, and he is absolutely right, is whether you think you can or you can't, and you are probably right. And this is all connected as well to your mindset and level of motivation. But let's look at, I mean, for personal projects, what do they need to have to give you the motivation and to sustain your motivation? Well, I mean, linked to, as we just talked about, intrinsic motivation, they need to feel a real desire for you. If you're not interested, isn't that right? You just won't do it. It's not capturing your imagination. A personal project, you should have a goal. And I mean, I love the way Marie just described in setting yourself, you know, that stage by stage goal and have a clear idea of where you wanted to be. And, you know, when you were talking about, you know, being in the vaccination center and what you had to do. Reflect your values, you know, just where you are in life. And Marie, I just love that, you know, how you described it at a certain time in your life. Even though other people were saying to you, oh, but, you know, X, Y, Z, this is expected of you. Actually, you worked to your own values and your own emotions, and you knew at that moment, that's what you wanted to do. That's what you needed to do. And actually, there was an intrinsic motivation there, as you described, you know, when you were talking to a professional, we went, you've got to do this as well for yourself. So it was a mixture of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. And a personal project should always lead to action, and it should be something you enjoy. See, many people do projects and goals, and they look as if they're having an excruciatingly difficult time, and I see no joy in it. And you have to question why, because it can also be those projects which we feel very worthy about doing, but if they're not genuinely capturing your imagination, question why you're doing it. And again, just other aspects of good life projects. An interesting one there, it's freely chosen. And this goes by choice because sometimes, and especially with family members or partners or friends or others, you know, something can be suggested to us which becomes a joint goal, but it's not really our goal, or you feel obliged. We've talked about this sense of obligation earlier in doing something for someone else. So that's, again, question why you're doing something. It's important to have something totally you. And we talked about it earlier, and a lot of those last 2 points are linked to realistic optimism, which I know, Marie, we had spoken a lot about earlier. but making sure you have a clear outcome and the commitment and resources to it with some of your life projects. So you can see, and the next workshop will be delving in a lot more to goal setting and habit forming, but all of these other techniques, which we looked at in our last workshop, reinforce motivation. We talked about visualization techniques, vision boards. We've talked about affirmations, you know, that if you pretend it is, it's much more likely to be. So if you get in that space, remember we said the affirmation, I am feeling joy at crossing the finish line of the Belfast Marathon, and writing affirmations about what you want to achieve, help that. And again, with a healthy dose, as always, of realistic optimism. So looking and maybe just wind up, and we have to say the best and the worst motivator of them all. I'm sure you all recognize David Brent. But just as a sum up, you know, when we're thinking of mindsets and also wanting to see something through, you know, check your thinking, read the room. What I mean when I say read the room is look and see, are you getting feedback from other people? And this is the realistic optimism. Are there, you know, pitfalls being flagged up that you need to think about? What is the reaction to what you're proposing? And also as well, be prepared to challenge other people. You know, which and Maura and Marie, you know, you have both done when you were talking about what you're pursuing. And we say that again, to avoid the art of procrastination, don't just talk about it, work at it. Taking the first full small step in a personal project it's just the getting started. What's that phrase? You don't need to race up the whole staircase, you just need to be able to see the first step. And the optimistic and bringing a little bit of magic, keeping it real, as we said, and this is the title of the workshop, that thread of realism throughout is really important. We talked about the importance of having plan B and actually feeling comfortable with our limits and having a growth mindset at the same time, totally achievable. And in fact, is really something we should be aiming for, you know, because all of us, we all have our limits. There's stuff we're not so great at. And that's fine, you know, and again, going back to Maslow's hierarchy of self-actualization, part of that is acceptance as well about things for self. And again, as we said, the importance of acknowledging others with their help and flagging up, you know, just things that we need to be aware of. And again, just on the procrastination, I just think this is a really nice one, you know, the wish for it, hope for it, dream of it. But I will leave you with Nelson Mandela and listening to both of you. Your stories that both of you shared at the end, for me, actually says it all. Nothing is impossible till it's done. And Maura and Marie, you are both living proof of that today. So I am going to just stop the recording now, actually. And we